Welcome, guys. So today's webinar will be focusing on how to choose a volunteer management software solution, also known as a VMS, with confidence. And if I go through to the next slides, a little bit about myself. So I'm Daniel Green. I'm the software sales advisor for Better Impact here in the UK. I support small to enterprise-sized organisations across UK, Europe and Africa, exploring our software solutions. You already know from our chat just before, but I'm born and raised in Essex, UK, having spent most of my career in sales, helping people achieve their goals along the way. My interests include being a busy dad to my 11-year-old son, and I have a keen passion for most sports. So getting to know you. We have loads to unpack today, but before we do, it'd be great to start by getting to know you. Again, we've already had that pre-chat. You've already put your where you're from and your names in the chat. But we are going to start off with a couple of questions and just respond, if you wouldn't mind, in the chat box to the questions on the next slide. So question one, have you ever used a VMS, a volunteer management software? Again, just use the chat box just to put one, yes, two, no, or three, you're not quite sure. I think, Tracy, you're already using Razor's Edge, so I already have your answer. And Sam, number one, yes. Sam, if you just, again, if you wouldn't mind just putting in what you're currently using, that'd be great, just for a bit of feedback. Oh, thank you. Charity RM, yeah, heard of them. Excellent, thank you, guys. Question two, what tool are you using the most to manage your volunteer program now? And I'm guessing that's going to go back to the VMSs you're both using. I'm guessing that radio silence means yes, you're using Razor's Edge, and thank you. Excellent. So do you sometimes relate to how this woman is feeling? So when I take a look at this person, I see them feeling overwhelmed, upset, fatigued, or probably just stressed out. Do you guys feel like this more often than you like in your role? Then obviously there has to be a better way. So when the challenges we experience in our role increase, we can start to feel like this person in this image. If so, then it's time for a change. So just some of the commonly cited problems by volunteer engagement professionals when not using a VMS that can lead you feeding to this person in the photo could be things such as too much data entry, duplication of data entries. Maybe it's reporting that takes an abundance of time to produce, lack of data integrity, resulting in increased risk for poor decisions being made for the program. It could be too much time being spent on administrative tasks, resulting in less time working in direct volunteer engagement and program progression. Or it could be using antiquated tools and systems for ones not designed specifically for volunteer services. Or using several disconnected tools to perform the role. For example, one to help log hours, another for shift sign-ups and scheduling, or maybe a third that could be email, newsletter, communications, and so on. Or it could be a lack of proper data security controls of confidential volunteer information, inability for staff to access the right data when needed, or ultimately volunteer and staff disengagement and retention challenges. Well, more than half of all employees are unhappy at work because of the software tools they're using. Well, 51.95% says yes. So have you ever become dissatisfied at work due to missing or mismatched software? And just to let you know, these stats have been pulled from the G2's 2019 State of Software Happiness Report. So it is important to have the right tools for the job and having that all-in-one solution. project managers, accountants, sales and marketing, etc., have software designed for their roles that make their work easier, and so can you guys. Software that's specifically designed for the work of volunteer engagement professionals. As you can see here on the screen, this could well include things like recruiting, screening, training for volunteers and staff, onboarding, scheduling and communications, time logging, reporting, tracking and recording data, and so much more. And from the volunteers' perspective, they'll have the opportunity to apply, receive and send communications. They'll be able to sign up for vacancies, manage their own volunteer schedule, update their profile info with contact information. They'll have the opportunity to log hours and reports on their contribution, and so much more as well. And can a spreadsheet do all that? It's hard to find one that does. So there's so many benefits to using a volunteer management software, which can ultimately result in better use of our time. And as you can see here on the list are some examples of these benefits. Better use of your time, and everyone's, including volunteers. You get better reporting, communications, stakeholder engagement, better data security and confidentiality, better data integrity, better value due to consolidating the number of systems in use without that big price tag, better visibility of your program through the use of modern technology, better accessibility to data, better volunteer and staff morale and retention, which again leads to everything better, better, better. So to land at that better place, a change must happen. You can get there, you will get there, but first, you and your team must acknowledge that to do so does require change from that current state to that desired state. We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So it's also important to recognise that how we think can sometimes be the cause of the problems we are experiencing and hindering us from getting to the desired state, that better place. So what's preventing change? Attitudes. Attitudes are our way of learning, of responding to people and situations based on, the beliefs, values, and assumptions we hold that are reflected in our behaviour. As you see on the screen here, are some attitudes you may find you or your colleagues, whether it's leadership, volunteers, board of directors, etc., face when contemplating a system change. So just to point out a few from on the screen, for example, we can't afford software. Many of us are constricted to affordability of software due to having a budget, but ask yourself, what is this costing you in terms of lack of software? Spreadsheets are free, yes, but do they hold all the necessary functions you require of a VMS as well? My volunteers can't use technology. Is it they can't, or are you assuming they can't? Perhaps reach out and survey your volunteers about technology. Who knows, you may be surprised. It's too much work to make the change. Try to be optimistic on this approach and try not to make this an overwhelming solo journey. Get your colleagues involved as well. If you want to move that needle to distance yourself from the problems being experienced to land in a better spot, then obviously change is the answer. So, am I a part of the solution or the problem? Check in with yourself and ask your teammates to do so as well, before, during, and beyond this journey, in terms of whether your attitude is creating friction or flow in supporting you and your team's ability to get to that desired state, of reaching that goal. So today, I will be sharing with you some templates and a buyer's guide so you and your team can follow to make the process of finding your VMS journey very easy. Templates, I find, are a great resource as the groundwork has already been done. So let's reduce the heavy lifting for you and your team Let's reduce the uncertainty felt from wondering if you're on the right path or making the right decisions, and get you using tools for your job. You know, others have done so in the past, and so can you. You can do this, guys. So let's get into that approach. So one of the main steps in your VMS journey is to figure out how you will overcome your problem in order to reach your goal. There can be many challenges you may be experiencing. The key here is to shed some light on the main problems, not all, as some are greater priority due to their consequential impact on people and the organisation. So following on from this webinar, as I mentioned at the start, I will be sharing with you some worksheets, including these templates and a guide to set you on the right course to choosing the right VMS. One of these will be the problem statement. So on here on your screen, you'll be able to identify any of the problems, who it affects, and the consequences. For example, one of your main problems to identify could well be assessing your program for data security issues. And if you find any, make that your primary focus and therefore identify who it affects, you know, such as your IT department, for example, and what will the consequences be in finding these issues. Another problem could well be, is the software user-friendly, and who it affects, such as your colleagues or administrators, or even your volunteers, which in turn could possibly result in staff or volunteer turnover or disengagement. So to select a VMS that our team is confident will solve our challenges and elevate our program's organisation to new heights of mission achievement. So create your problem statement, define your goal, and once you come up with the proposed solution, you will then want to lean on leadership to give you the green lights and permission to form a project to explore and overcome these problems. So as I mentioned previously, try not to make this approach as a project solo and be overwhelmed. Make this a team project, get everyone involved on board who will be involved in your journey, as your team's needs will be taken into account and consideration. And together as a team, you'll overcome any barriers to reach your goal. So as I mentioned, who is... Oh, skipped a slide there. Let me go back. So who is this awesome team? Take a minute to consider who you may want and need in your team to reach your goal. So let's begin with the volunteer coordinator or the manager. So this person or people are critical in your team, as it will most likely be them that be using your new software on a day-to-day basis. So it's highly important as key users that they'll want their say and input into this project. Which also leads me on to the volunteer. It's certainly recommended to make your volunteers a part of this team. I recommend having no more than probably 2 volunteers, one who is proficient, let's say, with technology, and one who isn't, so they can be consulted on challenges that may come up. Your IT colleague or department is an integral part of this team, as they will be the backbone to assess if the data security, you know, matches up to the organisation's requirements and standards. If you haven't got such an IT team, try outsourcing someone to oversee this portion of the project. And that also brings me onto the consultant project manager, who you may want to outsource to lean on for their valuable expertise and guidance of such VMS projects. So if you have the budget for this kind of approach, make sure they are also a part of your team. And that just leaves the executive director or board of directors. You know, depending on your organisation structure, you may have either both or one of these team members to include, as it will most likely be them the final say and give the thumbs up. So it's extremely important to include them as part of your team as well. So back to the worksheet. Who are the members of your project team and what's their involvement likely to be? You'll have some columns here, including name, job title, and the purpose for involvement or project role. So you can always refer back to these worksheets as well, if turnover occurs and team members change throughout your project as well. Needs assessment. So now we've identified who's on the team, who are we going to lean on our team members to find out what our needs are. So this leads me onto the vendor profile. So this is a critical step. The needs assessment becomes your measuring stick you use against each vendor that you consider. So you are vetting more than this inanimate object known as a VMS. The company and people who make up the company make decisions that affect products and company matter. So choose your tech partners wisely. So you would want to evaluate vendors on these particular categories. The vendor profile. What's the stability of the vendor? Decision-making process for products. Do they offer a demo? Do they offer a trial? And then you've got the technological aspect. How well does the product and people keep your data secure? Do they offer two-factor authentication for that extra layer of security? Are they certified and regulated? For example, are they certified for ISO 27001? Are they compliant with privacy and accessibility? And support. What is their response time? Do they provide phone, email, online chat support, or any other means of support? What's their location and hours support look like? And the all-important budget. What's their subscription and one-time costs? How does the billing work? Are upgrades and updates included in this subscription as well? Other key elements to consider is the functionality or functional requirements. Does the vendor accomplish your needs on your key features? For example, such as recruitment and onboarding, communications, scheduling, maybe it's reporting. Is there a volunteer portal or perhaps a mobile app? And that moves us on to usability. Is it intuitive, easy to use? Is there any guidance, tutorials, training material or site guides for staff and volunteers? And what does their interface look like? And lastly, scalability. What's the future needs if the program was to grow, shrink, or changes over time? Or if it was to branch out to other locations? All these needs should really be considered as well. So back on the worksheet, you'll see some pre-filled areas to gather information with some examples such as how long have you been in business, when was your last software release, how many customers do you have, and so on. And please note that, again, you can edit, amend this list as you may update this over time as well. You'll also list out your needs on the categories we just discussed, such as budget, usability, features, supports, and so on. Are these needs a priority? So this is a great way to keep track of how vendors meet these needs, but also using the vendor 1, vendor 2, V3, V4, and so on columns. And using this portion of your worksheet does keep you on track and dispel that memory fog when comparing several options at once as well. So when developing your needs, it's important to prioritize them and think about what your must-haves, should-haves, and your nice-to-haves will be. So a must-have is mandatory. So if a must-have is missing, then you should really consider disqualifying them as a VMS candidate because it doesn't meet your needs, basically. So remember to be ruthless and unwavering at this point. The should-haves are certainly important to you as they add value. However, if they aren't found, then they're not necessarily a disqualification either. And finally, that leaves me to your nice-to-haves. So this is definitely a bonus if found, however, does not make an impact like your must-haves or even should-haves, but this can be utilised in the future if needs be. So let's get you into the journey of choosing the right VMS for you and your team. So your journey will most likely move through 4 stages, which will, in many cases, can take between 2 and 4 months. Again, that's depending on your, your organisation's size and structure. The first is to determine who your VMS contenders will be. The second will be the demonstrations provided from them selected contenders. The third will be testing out these contenders in a trial environment. And last and fourth will be making that all-important decision in subscribing. So, stage one, determine your VMS contenders. This will be broken down in a few steps. You see here on the screen, step one is your needs assessment. And using our worksheet, you can build this up and decide who is on the project team and listing your requirements along with prioritizing them as well. This should take about a week or so, depending on the size of the organization. However, larger companies may take a bit longer and involve stakeholders for planning as well. On to step two is to review the needs assessment, which again involves your project team to discuss, revise, and finalize that document. Step three is the vendor research, which will likely be focused on your IT and volunteer services team who may look around, and research other resources. They may ask their peers what they're using to come up with a list of possibilities. And you'll also see in column 3 that there's a link to volunteersoftwarecomparisons.com. This should be a useful site as it lists many different volunteer management solutions, which will include links to their websites and also gathering their reviews from such sites as Trustpilot and G2. And step 4 will be your vendor review and first round of shortlisting. Again, your project team will be involved to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each. So record their decision and determine who will be shortlisted for the next round. So for shortlisting, you want to start with your technological requirements and then on to your support, functional and budget requirement must-haves. At the end of stage 1, your project team will have shortlisted those contenders, so they're able, to move on to stage 2. On your worksheet, you'll be able to track who the vendor contenders are, which ones remained qualified, and if any were disqualified, you can log the reason why and keep this for your own reference, or for the vendor if they wish to gather any feedback. So on to the second stage, the demo stage. So at this point on step 1, you want to schedule in some time with the vendors to watch a demo or watch some videos provided from their websites. Members of your team that have functional questions should also be involved in watching these demonstrations and also keep a list of these questions so you can verify with your vendor. On average, this can be from half hour to 2 hours long, again, depending on the complexity of each demo. And that moves us on to step 2, which will be your vendor review and second round of shortlisting. And with your project team, you'll be able to discuss, record, and create a shorter list for contenders to move them on to stage 3. So this is what your shortlist could look like at the end of stage 2, and primarily focusing on the functional requirements and must-haves. Your project team would have shortlisted contenders to move on to stage 3. And on your worksheet, you will see that their 3 vendors have moved on to this stage with 2 vendors qualified and 1 which has been disqualified, and again, along with that reason. Again, this is entirely up to you, but we do recommend at this stage probably only taking 2 vendors onto stage 3. Excuse me. Now on to stage 3 and on to step 1, the trial. So this will involve any members of your project team who have usability questions. I would definitely recommend involving a pilot team of volunteer coordinators and volunteers as well, or perhaps use some fake data, to test out different scenarios. So you want to sign up, explore the system for all them key features and functions, and of course, evaluate the supports as well. And again, depending on the vendor, trials can sometimes be a week, 2 weeks, or even up to a month. And then in step 2 will be another vendor review and another round of shortlisting. So with your project team involved, you want to discuss, record that discussion, and select one vendor that you'd like to take to the next stage. So back to the worksheet, and you can see here we have shortlisted 2 contenders focusing on usability and support requirement must-haves, with 1 disqualified, along with the logged reason. And now it's up to you guys and your team to make that software decision. So with the best VMS contender now qualified, you can take this to your leadership team for approval. Get that all-important thumbs up. So we're almost at the finish line now at stage 4, subscribing. So now we've recommended a solution to leadership, and now a team project member will, with perhaps an executive director, can now focus on presenting this to your board of directors. The time frame on getting that all-important green light could happen quite quickly, or in some cases a lot longer, and again, depending on the size of your organisation and infrastructure. So throughout this journey, we have planned, we've prepared, and we have executed this plan. And by following all these steps, you have chosen wisely and with confidence. However, you're not quite there yet. There is still some work to do with transitioning your program into your new VMS before launch. However, change is now imminent for you and your team, but this does create opportunity. So as I addressed at the start, I am the software sales advisor for Better Impact. Just a little bit about us. We do offer a volunteer management software solution, better known as Volunteer Impact, which provides an all-in-one platform where you can manage your own branded online applications. You have the ability to customize volunteer profiles. You'll be able to track training and onboarding. You can manage background checks through qualifications. You'll also be able to create e-learning modules. You can create activities and manage your schedules. You can even text and email within our software for communication purposes. You can report on hours and outcomes. And your volunteers will also have their own portal called My Impacts page, which is also app-based, which is free to download on any Android or iPhone device. And plus, there's so many other features as well, not mentioned yet. And again, feel free to check out our reviews on Trustpilot and G2 when you get the chance to hear the great comments from our happy members. So wrapping up, again, as I mentioned at the start, I will be sending you a link to this webinar recording, plus our buyer's guide to selecting the right VMS with confidence, along with them worksheets that we went through and shared together throughout the webinar. So keep an eye on your inbox. That should be with you, hopefully within the next 24 hours.